Welcome back to Daily Kingdom Growth, where we are walking through the entire Bible cover to cover to discover God's incredible story and how it applies to our lives today. I'm Mitchell Beecher, and today we are diving into Genesis chapters 36 through 39, where we see more family feuds, betrayal, and God's sovereignty. They are all part of today's story, where we see God's hand at work, even through human failures. But before we begin, a quick recap of the last episode. In Genesis 33 through 35, Jacob reconciles with his brother Esau, journeys back to Bethel, and experiences God's reaffirming his promises. These chapters laid the foundation for what's coming next in Jacob's family dynamic and God's providential plan. If you missed it, be sure to check it out on our YouTube channel. Now, let's move forward. Genesis 36 gives us a lineage of Esau, also known as Edom. This chapter lists his descendants and their development into the Edomite nation. While it might seem just like a genealogy, which it is, it reveals God's faithfulness to his promise to Abraham, that his descendants would multiply and become nations. Even though Esau wasn't chosen for the covenant line, God didn't abandon him. We take a look at Genesis 36:8 says, "So Esau," that is Edom, "settled in the hill country of Seir." This reminds us that God's blessings, it extends beyond Jacob, showing his care for all people. If you ever wondered whether God's promises include you, remember this: God's faithfulness reaches far and wide. Now, as Esau's family thrives, the focus shifts to Jacob's family, and specifically his son Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. This is where the story gets super intense. Joseph, the favored son, receives a multicolored robe from his father. This robe symbolizes his special status. But Joseph, he dreams of greatness, where his family bows to him. It stirs this jealousy and this hatred among his brothers. See, Joseph had a dream, and he tells his brothers, and they don't like it because he is the youngest brother. So in a heartbreaking act, his brothers sell him into slavery. Joseph's betrayal by his own family mirrors the betrayal Jesus actually experiences. Joseph's story foreshadows Christ, who was also rejected and betrayed for the ultimate purpose of salvation. So Genesis 37:28 says, "So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern or the well and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt." So doesn't that remind you of Judas's betrayal for Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? God's sovereignty shines through right here in Joseph's story. Now, before we follow Joseph all the way south to Egypt, Genesis 38 takes us on a detour to Judah and Tamar. This chapter might feel a little surprising, but it's very essential. See, Judah's failure to uphold his responsibility to Tamar leads to her taking matters into her own hands. Through this situation, Tamar becomes part of the lineage of Jesus, showing God's grace and redemption even in brokenness. So Genesis 38:26 says, Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. What a powerful reminder that God's grace works even through our failures. And finally, Genesis 39. Joseph's story takes center stage again. We come back to Joseph. Despite being a slave in Egypt, Joseph excels in Potiphar's house because God is with him. However, Potiphar's wife falsely accuses him of misconduct, and Joseph is thrown into prison. Even there, God's faithfulness remains. Joseph's integrity through these trials points us to Jesus, perfect, blameless, and enduring suffering for God's purpose. So Genesis 39:21 says, "The Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden." So no matter our trials, God's presence is our greatest comfort. So as we wrap up today, let's reflect on how God's faithfulness is evident in Esau's lineage, Joseph's betrayal, Tamar's redemption, and Joseph's trials. Here's my challenge for you today. Take time to reflect on how God has been faithful in your life, even in the tough times. Reflect. Trust that his plan is at work, even when it's hard to see. So next time, we'll see how Joseph's trials lead to something extraordinary as God begins to use him to save an entire nation. So don't miss it. Hey, if today's episode spoke to you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness. Until then, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep building God's kingdom.